1999 war on Serbia, a NATO war, by the way. Not even just a U.S. war, that was NATO bombing of Serbia for 41 consecutive days. Then 9/11 happened. Putin said, we will support you, even support your war in Afghanistan at the beginning. And then Iraq. And Putin was again, are you kidding? You're going to go to war in Iraq? And of course, Russia was completely pushed aside. And that was an ally of Russia, Saddam Hussein. And it was a war on completely phony charges. And by the way, not mistaken charges, phony charges. You could tell it a mile away, by the way. But I remember I was on a talk show. What's his name? Charlie Rose. So, like usual, there were 6 people around the table, all of them saying, war, 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 Saddam, he's Hitler, war, 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 weapons of mass destruction. And it came to me, because this was the day that Colin Powell was in the UN Security Council, and I said, I'm against this war. Mr. Sachs, are you calling General Powell a liar? And the camera was frozen on me, and I said, well, I suppose I am. I don't believe that. It's pretty clear that this is how you talk when you don't really have the goods. Turned out to be that way. 10 years later, everybody knew it at the time. Well, in fact, everybody was in favor of war at the time. It was not pleasant. So that was 2003. Then in 2007, 7 NATO enlargements. And think of them. Bulgaria and Romania and the Black Sea, the 3 Baltic countries, Slovenia and Slovakia. That's a heavy dose for Russia. But then in 2008 at the Bucharest summit, Bush, over the strenuous objections of all European leaders who knew that this was a terrible idea, pushed for NATO enlargement to Ukraine and to Georgia. And European leaders, being European, they don't speak in public against the United States. So they negotiated. They said, okay, no roadmap, no partnership agreement, but the final declaration will say that Ukraine and Georgia will become members of NATO, which is what the 2008 Bucharest summit communique says. The next day was the NATO-Russia summit, because we still had those meetings then. And Putin said to Bush, if you move on NATO enlargement, we will take back Crimea. This was 2008, 14 years ago. Because Crimea is our naval base and has been since 1783, thank you. So in 2010, Yanukovych became president of Ukraine, which was very fortunate for Ukraine, because Yanukovych understood that he was in a delicate balancing act. And so he had Europe and the US on one side, he had Russia on the other side, and the first thing he said is, we need to stay neutral. And so he pushed neutrality through the Ukrainian parliament, and he negotiated a long-term lease arrangement for Sevastopol, that Russia would have its naval base rights until 2041, with the potential of extension after that. Well, Europe pushed very hard for the accession agreement, and the United States pushed very hard to topple Yanukovych. And in the Maidan, though we don't really know all the things that historians someday will know, we do know how active the United States was in stoking the insurrection. And interestingly for me, I was asked by the Ukrainian prime minister who came to office the next day, Mr. Yatsenuk, to fly to Kiev to meet with him to talk about the economic situation, which I did. And when I arrived in Kiev, I was shown around by a leading American NGO that described to me all the money that they had put into this successful overthrow. So I saw and heard with my own eyes the American involvement in the overthrow of a pro-Russian government. That's pretty provocative. Europe negotiated the evening in February 2014 that Yanukovych would stay in power and that there would be elections late in 2014. There was gunfight from the Ukrainian nationalist side, because careful scholars have shown that the bullets that killed the policemen and the bullets that killed the protesters were from the same guns from the hotels controlled by the insurrectionists. And Yanukovych fled, and Europe immediately said the next day, okay, we recognize the new government. Because Victoria Nuland, you remember, who loved Europe so much in that taped phone call, I don't know if you remember her French, but I'm sure you do, that was the American policy. So the pro-Russian government was overthrown. A quite radical Russophobic government was brought in extra-constitutionally in violation of the Ukrainian constitution. The US and Europe immediately recognized that government. Putin seized Crimea, and the separatists backed by Russia declared independence of Lugansk and Donetsk.